Okay, welcome to this week's Parsha Parshas Vayechi. So the starting point is something fascinating I saw in the writings of Rabbi Yaakov Bender, the famous Rosh Shiv from America, and he says something fascinating. He quotes a Rashbam. Let's take a look at the first box on the page. For those listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. We're talking about brachas. Like I said earlier, in the Halacha Shir, this week's Sedra is full of brachas. Yaakov gives brachas to all his children, even to his grandchildren, and something very interesting to note. Take a look at the first pasuk. Vayhi achrei hadvarim ha'eleh, vayomer leYosef hinei avicha cholah. They tell Yosef that Yaakov is ill. Vayikach es shnei bonov, he hurries there with Ephraim and Menashe. Es Menashe ves Ephraim. Vayagid Yaakov vayomer hinei bincha Yosef ba elecha. So they tell Yaakov that Yosef is on the way. Vayischazek Yisrael vayeshev al hamita, and he strengthens himself and he sits up in the mitzvah. Vayikach Yosef es shneihem es Ephraim b'minam es Yisrael, and that whole incident of the right and the left and the hand switching, etc. Then the pasuk says, Vayevarech es Yosef vayomer, and he benches vayomer, I think, and Yaakov Avinu gives a bracha to Yosef. And then the psukim continue, Hamalach HaGoel Esim Yikara, the famous pasuk. But what's strange is that we're not told what the bracha to Yosef is, because he goes straight into the bracha, which is for Menashe and Ephraim. The bracha of Hamalach HaGoel Esim Yikara, Yivarech es Hana'orim, V'yikar b'em Shmi, V'shem Avos Avim Savit, that's a bracha to Menashe and Ephraim. So when it says Vayivarech es Yosef, what exactly is the bracha to Yosef? That's a great question. So the Rashbam, he quotes, answers with 5 words. Look at this. Vayevarech es Yosef. Obviously, the Rashbam is perplexed by this problem. Says the Rashbam, the grandson of Rashi, the famous Pirush on Gemara and on Chumash, Birchas habonim hi birchas ha'av. The bracha to children is a bracha to parents. Isn't that amazing? In other words, at the end of the day, what do the parents really want? Parents just want to see nachas from their kids. And therefore, a bracha to the kids is a bracha to the parents. When it says, Vayevarech es Yosef, the greatest bracha to Yosef was to give a bracha to his kids. I must tell you, when I looked in, I was preparing Parsha Shiur earlier in the week, and I came across this. I had found something to say in assembly on Tuesday morning. It was the first day back in school after the winter break. There's a new head teacher in the girls' school, so my job was to stand up and to welcome her and to introduce her to the students. And I said the following Rashbam. I said it to them. I said over this Rashbam because I wanted to give her, a welcome and a wishes of success in her new job. And I said to the kids, I said to the students that I said this Rashbam, that the greatest bracha for parents is to see nachas from their kids, is to give a bracha to the kids. And therefore, we as teachers are, in loco parentis, the Latin phrase, we are standing in the place of parents. In halacha, it's actually more so. Really, Talmud Torah is a din on the parents. And, therefore we're literally standing in their shoes. But we are in loco parentis, and therefore I gave a bracha to the children, to the students, and that is the greatest bracha, because their success is her success, is our success. And that's really what this Rashbam is saying. He, often, Hartman and I do it now as well. We've got a kid who's not, pulling his weight properly. He's not showing up to Shacharis, or he's not pulling his weight in Shiur, whatever it is. And, we need to call the parents in and discuss it. And often, I saw the Rabbi do this many times. He sits with the parents, and he sits with the kid, even if it's just the kid there, and he talks to the child. He says to the young man, at the end of the day, what do your parents want? At their stage in life, do you think they want another chandelier? Is that going to really make it for them? When they're younger, maybe they think that will do it. But when they're at an older stage, in their middle years, let's say, another chandelier is not mila or mer. It's not going to make any difference. And what they really, really want is nachas from the kids. And that's really what it's saying. That's pshat in the Rashbam. The Rabbi Yaakov Bender goes on and says something very beautiful. He tells quite a well-known story with Rabbi Elia Lapien. Rabbi Elia, the grandfather of Dayan Lapien, the great mashgiach in the last century. He, of course, lived his years in London for much of his life. And then his final years, he was in Kfar Hasidim as the mashgiach in Eretz Yisrael. He went to retire there, age 70. He went to visit the Chazon Ish, and the Chazon Ish said to him, "What are your plans?" And he said, "I'm going to sit and learn." And the Chazon Ish said, "No." He says, "You are a mashgiach, and you've got an obligation to continue in that role, to help Talmidim and to cultivate and develop Talmidim. And perhaps the most productive 20 years of his life were those final 20 years. He died, I think, age 90, where he was the mashgiach. And anyway, they tell the story that Reb Elia was once walking with a young bocher, and they were walking in the street, and suddenly Reb Elia, an old mashkiach, bends down and he picks up a few leaves. And he says to this young bocher, he says, you see these leaves? He says, people may think that these leaves have experienced freedom. They're no longer attached to the tree, they can float around, they can go wherever they want, but those that are still attached to the tree, they're captive, they're captured. They're restrained, they can't do and go wherever they want. He says, but it's the opposite, isn't it? Because those that detach themselves from the tree, they're going to wither and die. But those that are still connected to the tree will give it the necessary nutrients to keep them alive. He says, people think there's a big wide world out there, and they want to explore and be free, but once they disconnect from parents, from Rabbi, from Torah, then it's over. There's got to be a connection. And that, Eitz Chaim ile machazikim bo, it's an Eitz Chaim for those who grasp onto it. Now that young bocher was of course Rav Matisyahu Solomon. And he writes in his book here, he says, Rav Matisyahu Solomon, a man who taught several generations about connection, children to parents, Talmidim to their Rabbeim, and Yidden to the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's a very beautiful sort of postscript to that story. And he concludes, Rabbi Benzer, saying something very interesting, that Parshas Vayechi is of course the end of Sefer Bereshis. And the Sefer is also known as Sefer Yesharim, which is a reference to the Avos, whose actions and whose experiences shape the lessons which we try and emulate. And it ends with Yosef seeing great-grandchildren. It says that he took great-grandchildren on his knee and they were following in his path. And that's really, he says over here, a climax to a Sefer dedicated to the Avodah of the forefathers, not just that they lived to reflect Kavod Shemayim, but that they merited to establish a family upon which the Rebbeinu Shalom would rest his presence. And that is the essence of everything. Okay, so that is the first offering of this evening. Now the next offering is remarkable. A background story. Pesach Kronish, tells the following story. It was told to him by Reb Meir Zlotowitz. Reb Meir Zlotowitz, of course, the founder of ArtScroll, passed away in 2017. One of the great revolutionaries of our time, really. What he's contributed to Klal Yisrael in terms of ArtScroll is changed the Torah world without a doubt. Anyway, Reb Meir Zlotowitz had a very close connection with Reb Moshe Feinstein. And one time, he came to visit Reb Moshe. He would often go to him to seek halachic guidance and personal issues as well. And one time he went into Reb Moshe, and he noticed that Reb Moshe was with two businessmen, and Reb Moshe was adjudicating some sort of Din Torah dispute between them. And he was just finishing off, so he was waiting patiently outside, but he couldn't but help see exactly what was transpiring. He had just settled the Din Torah, and let's give them names. I'll use the names that Pesach Kron gives them, Yoel and Hillel, two businessmen. So he settled in favor of this Yoel, and he said to Hillel, that he said, look, you've offered to pay, but I want you, I want you to ask forgiveness from Yoel for the distress that you caused him. So he said, okay, I'm very sorry that I caused you this akmas nefesh, and I apologize profusely, and I'm sorry. Fine. Then Reb Moshe turned to the other one and said, well, I'd like you to say, I meichel you, I forgive you. So he said, yeah, look, of course, he didn't mean it, and I was meant to have this aggravation, and, it's fine. Reb Moshe held him by the elbow and said, that's maybe so, but I want you to actually be meichel, and please say you're sorry. He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted me to have this akmas nefesh, don't worry about it, we've settled it, it's fine. Reb Moshe was adamant. He says, please say the words, I forgive you, I'm meichel you. So he said, okay, I'm meichel you. That's it. He saw them off, he said goodbye to them, they went, Reb Meir Zlotowitz walked in. Reb Meir Zlotowitz said, what was that about? So that's part A of the story. Okay? Now, let's take a look at this. There is a famous kinnah that we say on Tisha B'Av. We say it also on Yom Kippur as well. It's called Arzei Halvonon. It's one of the most tragic kinnahs that we say on Tisha B'Av. Arzei Halvonon Aderi Batorah. Bale Trisin b'Mishnah v'Gemara Giberi Korach Amalei b'Tahara. And it's the story of the Asora Harugei Malchus, where the 10 giants of Jewish history, Rabbi Akiva and others, were tortured to death by the Romans over a period of many decades. Now, the background to this kinnah is actually in a medrash called Eile Ezkara. Look at this medrash. Very, very interesting. Achach Ruben Habayis, this is in the second box in paragraph 2. Achach Ruben Habayis, Hoya Pritze Hadar Miskoim. After the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, the more boorish of those in Klal Yisrael would arrogantly say, "Ma ifsadnu? What have we lost? It's just a building, the Beis Hamikdash. Ma ifsadnu b'zeh shenecher habayis. Hariyesh beinenu Talmidei Chachamim shemadrichin es ha'olam b'teirasav mitzvosov." We still have great Talmidei Chachamim who are alive still. Miyad nos laKodesh Baruch Hu b'leiv hakaiser shel Romi lilmod Torah miMoshe mipi hachachamim v'zakenim. Immediately, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was so incensed, was so disappointed with the reaction of those people who said, "What have we lost already?" He put in the mind of the Caesar, of the Roman emperor, to learn Torah from the Chachamim, from the Zakenim. Okay. For Hischil b'Sefer Bereshis, they started in Sefer Bereshis. And they went through the Chumash. They went through the whole of Bereshis, the whole of Shemos, until they got to Eila Mishpatim. They get to this pasuk: if you kidnap a person, miyad sholach likra l'asar chachmei Yisrael b'olafonov. He called the 10 leaders of the Jewish people. Omar lohen, and he said to them, Yesh li lishol mekem, I have a question to ask. Omar loemar, they said to him, ask, what is the question? Omar lohem, umishe gonov ishmei achiv shel bnei Yisrael v'sameh bo yamachre madinai. What is the halacha if you kidnap a person and you make them work? What is the halacha? Omru loy, so they said to him, ha-Torah omra mos yumos. The chayav misa, that's the punishment for kidnap. Ona v'omar lohem im kain atem chayav misa. If that's the case, you are all chayav misa. Omru loy emar lama. Why? What have we done? Omar lohem al mechiras Yosef shemachruhu achiv. Because the 10 brothers sold Yosef into slavery, as it were, they kidnapped him and sold him into slavery. V'im hoyu b'chayav v'yisidonosom. And if they were alive, the 10 brothers, I would have punished them. But you will carry the burden and the sin of your forebearers. Ad kan the medrash. So you see that the Asor Harugei Malchus, according to this medrash, is a kapara for the brothers, the Shvatim, who sold Yosef. Now, the difficulty is, why do they need a kapara? I've always been troubled by this. Surely, Yosef forgave them. Now we have many instances of this. Take a look at the bottom box. Vayomer Yosef el Echov ani Yosef. In last week's Sedra, the climax of the whole story is those 2 immortal words, ani Yosef. Yosef was emotional, he couldn't hold himself back anymore, and he told them, I am Yosef, Vayomer Yosef el Ach Kushula Ilai, Vayomer ani Yosef Achichem, etc. Don't worry about the fact that you sold me down here. It was all part of a divine plan. This was how it was meant to unfold. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted me to be in this situation so that I could sustain you, etc. That was his initial take. Moreover, if you look at the top of the next page, in this week's Sedra, in Parshas Vayechi, the pasuk says, "Vayiru achei Yosef ki meis avihem." After Yaakov Avinu dies, Vayomru lo yistamenu Yosef. The brothers were worried, maybe Yosef is going to be angry with them. And maybe he'll take revenge for everything we did to him. We'll be servants to you. And look what Yosef says. Vayomer aleim Yosef, al tirol, don't worry. Am I in place of God? What's the problem? This is all part of the divine plan. You tried to do bad to me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted it for the best. That I can sustain you. And he spoke to their hearts. What did that mean? He spoke to their hearts. So Rashi tells us, things which really spoke to them. Until you came down to here, people would spread rumors. I'm just an eved. They've just found in the streets. But through you, I'm a brother of an esteemed family. I'm a ben chorin. I'm not an eved. And if now that Yaakov has died, I kill you. What are the people going to say? He'll say he got a group of people and he pretended to be their brothers. And then he killed them. Would anyone kill their brothers? etc., etc. Either way, he said things which really, really spoke to the brothers. So my point is that you see that Yosef was very benevolent to them. He forgave them. So why did the brothers need a kapara? Yosef forgave them. Now, this is an amazing Rabbeinu Bachai. Look at this. The Rabbeinu Bachai on the pasuk Vayechi Goser b'dvarim. This is in pasuk Yud Zayin. Look at this Rabbeinu Bachai. Tekef she'ezkiru le'aviv bachal le'goydel avav v'nichnu rachmov. This is in Parshas Vayigash, in last week's Edra. V'hinei achiv bikshu mimenu mechila. And the brothers wanted to ask mechila. V'lo bir hakosov she'mochel lohem. But it doesn't say explicitly in the pasuk that Yosef forgave them. V'kvar biru Chazal, and the Gemara says in Baba Kama Tzamach Beis Amud Aleph, she'kol mi she'chota lechaveiro v'oso tshuva, einay nimcha la'olam ad shiratz es chaveiro. If you upset somebody, you can do whatever you want. You can do tshuva, and you can give stock, and you can say al chait. But unless you go up to that person and ask forgiveness, and they are moichel you, nothing doing. Even though it says that Yosef spoke to them and appeased them, that it shows that he was clearly warm towards them, but it does not say explicitly that Yosef forgave them. Nor does it say that he forgave their sin against him. And therefore the brothers died with the sin still existing. Below mechilas Yosef, without Yosef forgiving them, and therefore they cannot get a full kapara without his mechila. And therefore, because they didn't get the full kapara, there had to be an asor harugei malchus. Now that is an astonishing Rabbeinu Bachai. Coming back to our story, Ramosha then turned to Rameir Zlotowitz and said, that's why I was insistent that Rabbi Yoel would forgive Rabbi Hillel. That he actually says the words. It's not good enough to say that it's okay, don't worry, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted me to have this, etc. I wanted him to say the words based on this Rabbeinu Bachai. An astonishing insight, remarkable. Okay, let's one final idea. Excuse me. Now, this is just it's a ha'ara more than anything else, because we have mentioned this in the previous year. I try not to repeat, but I just want to make one interesting point. In previous years, and I think it was in 2019 or 2018, it's on Torah anytime, it's on the Parsha Shiur there, we mentioned the famous Vart of Chaim Shmulevitz, and it's well known and it's well quoted in his name, and that is the story with Chushim ben Don. What was the story? There's a Gemara in Sotah. The Gemara in Sotah says that when Yaakov Avinu died, he was buried, and he went from Mitzrayim to Maras HaMachpelah to be buried. And there was a hold-up at the Levaya. What was the hold-up? Because Esav rocked up. And the Gemara tells the famous story that Esav said, well, hang on a second, we're brothers, we share. There were two spots, and Yaakov used his one, because Leah has been buried there. And therefore, the other spot goes to me, says Esav. And they said, what are you talking about? We bought it from you. And he says, prove it. And there's a shtar mechira. And they wanted to get Naphtali to go back to Mitzrayim to get the shtar mechira. Whilst all of this was playing out, Chushim ben Don, who the Gemara says was hard of hearing, he was deaf, he said, why is there a hold-up? So they explained to him that Esav is trying to protest the burial of Yaakov Avinu. And Chushim was so incensed that he, at the affront to the bizayon, for the disgrace of his grandfather's covet, that he took a stick and he hit Esav, and that killed him, and his head rolled off. That's the famous Gemara. Asks Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, why was Chushim so incensed more than the others? Didn't everyone else see this as well? Didn't they also see the affront to Yaakov Avinu's covet? Why was it Chushim who saw it? And second of all, why does the Gemara have to tell us that Chushim was deaf? What's the significance of that? And then Reb Chaim Shmulevitz famously says, he talks about something called koyach histaglus. Koyach histaglus means the power of adaptability, that you can adapt to anything. Bein l'toiv, bein l'ra. You can adapt to good things, you can adapt to bad things, and that was his whole take. And therefore, the brothers slowly were getting engaged in this dialogue with Esav, that they got used to this sort of wrong situation. Mashein Ken Chushim, it came to him like a bolt out of the blue, and he didn't have that koyach, he didn't adapt to that situation, and therefore he considered it an absolute offense to Yaakov's dignity, and therefore he acted like he did. That's the koyach histaglus, and Chaim Shmulevitz speaks about it, and he brings other examples, etc. But my point is simply this. Everyone quotes from Chaim Shmulevitz, and of course it's in the Sichas Musa, but actually it's in the writings of the Maharal 400 years earlier. Amazing. And let's just take a look at the Maharal. This is in Chidush HaGodos in Soita. Just a few lines. Look at this. Chushim ben Don tamon hava v'yakirnei idnei. The Gemara says that Chushim ben Don was hard of hearing. Why is it that Chushim, the son of Don, did it, and not one of the other Shvatim, the brothers? Because at the outset of the story, they didn't think they would need to get involved in this. And when Esav began to present legal arguments and to argue, they didn't have, therefore, that passion, that excitement to act. When does the hisoirus happen? When is the excitement found? At the beginning of a new project, at the outset. Kasher Nodas is well known. That's when you have the power, the energy, the commitment to do it. He didn't know about the action at all. They had to go and find and get enough tali to go back, etc. Because it was exposed to him sort of straight away, he had that initial burst of excitement and of passion, and therefore he acted on it. So really, that whole idea you see in the writings of the Maharal 4 centuries before Reb Chaim Shmulevitz. He was mechavan to it. So it's just a very interesting observation that idea that Reb Chaim Shmulevitz is quoted as saying actually finds itself in the writings of the Maharal. So just to summarize what we've said, number one, the fascinating question of the Rashbam and others, when it says Vayvorach es Yosef, what is the bracha? The teretz is, the bracha is, as the Rashbam says, Birchas Abonim Birchas Av. The bracha to children is the biggest bracha to the parents, and that's really the bracha. That was the bracha to Yosef. Then we said this remarkable idea, this story of Rameir Zlotowitz, Ramosha. Why is it that you have Yasor Harogi Malchus? Surely Yosef forgave the brothers. That seems to be clear from the dialogue. The answer is he may have done, and he said nice things to comfort them, but he never actually says the words "I moichel you," I forgive you, and that was lethal. And therefore, says Rabbeinu Bachai, that therefore it needed some sort of kapara still, and that led to the killing of the Yasor Harogi Malchus, which we read on Yom Kippur and on Tisha B'Av. And that's why Moshe made that person forgive that person his Baal Din explicitly. And lastly, this famous koyach histaglus piece in Sichas Musa of Chaim Shmulevitz has its roots in a Maharal written 4 centuries earlier. Okay, we'll leave it there.